Welcome to Fright Fix. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. I'm quite looking forward to talk about this film, I think. We're going to be discussing Wounds, which is a 2019 film adaptation of a book, if I'm not mistaken. Which, for the context of why we're doing this film, I did a Google search of weird horror films that not many people might have seen, or something along those lines, and this was on
Yeah,
that list. So
I'd never heard of this ever
I hadn't
until you
either.
mentioned it. Yeah.
Well, I hadn't heard of this, but there was like a viral clip from this film, which I didn't realize was from this film until I saw it in the film, and I was like,
Oh,
"Oh, okay."
which
It's
bit was
it's
that?
the it's the bit where Will breaks up with what's her name, Carrie, and he's like, "I think we should break up," and she's eating breakfast, and she's like, "Okay, like, are you going to move out?" Or
Oh,
she's like so blasé about it. And he's like, "What, are you not going to be angry?" Or blah, blah, blah. And she's like, "No, like, that's fine, whatever."
yeah, yeah.
And the viral clip was like, this is how you break up with a narcissist, like this all this stuff about like the best way to break up with somebody who's trying to manipulate you into breaking up,
Sure,
kind of thing.
sure.
But it's interesting because when you watch the film, that's kind of not the message. We don't have to get into it now, but it's not really about him being a narcissist. It's about like they're both almost being possessed by something really weird, and they don't know what they're doing, and so she doesn't have any emotions because it's basically been drained out of her, so it's like funny when you watch the film and you see the context of something, and then you see a viral
Sure,
clip, and it's like
sure,
those two
sure.
things don't really match up very
Yeah, yeah.
well.
Just taken out of context entirely then.
Yeah. But yeah, I think this is not as well known. I mean, it's got Armie Hammer and Dakota Johnson in it, so it's probably, been viewed by a few people.
Yeah. I mean,
But yeah,
he's kind of on the Hollywood blacklist at the moment, isn't he? He hasn't made a movie in a long time.
was it because of the cannibalism rumors?
Something like that, yeah. I think he
Yeah.
joked about cannibalism or something, and actually, I don't know if it was for real or not. I have no idea, but he's not been in a movie in a few years now.
I have to admit, I don't really know who he was. I mean, when I saw his name, I thought, oh, it's the guy who eats people, which probably isn't the best way of thinking about it. But I can't remember seeing him in a different film and recognizing him. Um,
He's in a
but
few films. He's in that Lone Ranger movie as the Lone Ranger. He's in The
I haven't
Social
seen that.
Network. He plays the
Oh,
twins in the Winklevoss brothers in the Social Network movie, and
I don't
he's in
remember
a bunch
that.
of stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
Death
No, I know
Death
he's
on the
really
Nile.
famous. But I just don't think I'd really recognized him before
Hmm.
in anything. But I was quite intrigued by this film. The general plot is that a bartender finds a phone at his bar, and it ends up having really creepy things on it, and he doesn't know what it is, and it starts to divulge into craziness, which is what this film is about.
Yeah.
So I kind of had an idea of what was going to happen when it started, but what did you think from your kind of initial
Yeah, so
viewing?
I mean, I kind of read the blurb being exactly what you'd described, but I thought the movie was going to go in a totally different direction. I
Mm,
thought maybe there'd be a bit more, I don't know, mystery with the phone and who's on the other end of that phone, or maybe there's like a trying to figure out who it is. Or I mean, the movie was just not what I expected at all.
mm.
I'm just going to put it out there, and I'm hoping you can change my mind, but I did not enjoy this film.
Okay, that's fair enough. I think
Yeah,
that's fair
yeah.
enough.
Like there were moments in it that I thought were, oh, that's pretty cool. That's a pretty cool moment. But to me, this whole experience, maybe you can open my eyes, but I just found the entire experience very hollow, very soul draining, and just some bits were really well written. Like some bits of dialogue were
Mm,
really well written, and there were, but I think it was just overshadowed by just a lot of very badly written dialogue. I felt like with Armie Hammer, especially in the opening 5 minutes of the film, when being
yeah.
introduced to him, I felt like whoever wrote his dialogue wrote it thinking what their if I mean I don't know what their kind of idea of what a cool dude is, and
Right. So
like
it's
it
a
was
bit
just
like cringy and a bit
cringy.
dated.
Yeah, it just maybe hadn't had enough drafts, or maybe they
Mm.
hadn't shown it to their friend to get a second or third opinion. And or maybe they did have something good, and then Armie Hammer came in and said, "No, this isn't what I would say. This is what I would say because I'm a cool dude." So Yeah, it's like they're just really lame stuff like, oh, if you take your clothes off, then you get to have free drinks all night. Or if you take your top off, then you can have free drinks all night. Oh, I'm a
Yeah,
cool dude. You look at me. Hey, I'm gonna flirt with you in front of your boyfriend. I'm a cool dude.
I
It's just
know.
that's just what I got from it, and it's just like none of the characters were likable. I just did not
Yeah.
connect to anyone. Like, so before I run off, like, what were your overall thoughts of the film? Because yeah,
Well, yeah, it's really interesting that you say that because I had the same thoughts, but I thought about it differently. I'll try and explain.
okay.
I was like, I also don't like this character, but I don't think, from my perspective, I don't think we're supposed to like him. I think he's supposed to be quite cringy and a bit weird, and you wouldn't want to leave your daughter in a bar alone with him kind of person,
No,
because
sure.
he is very obviously obsessed with a woman who is not his girlfriend. Who, by the way, I think her name's Zazie.
Zazie Beetz.
Zazie Beetz. Absolutely love her in Atlanta. I'm obsessed with her. I think she's so cool.
Yeah.
And I was really happy to see her in this, to be honest. But I think from the opening scenes where you see him in the bar, he's clearly an alcoholic. And he comes across as very desperate, very protective, not in a good way, overbearing and possessive. And it's not even his girlfriend. And he's got a girlfriend at home. And I think for me, as I was going through the film, I was like, oh, okay, I don't think I'm supposed to like him. I think that as the film progresses and he ends up, let's say, allowing the wounds to open, it's because he's such a flawed person that he feels like he needs to be cleaned and he feels like he needs to be changed. And so he allows these things to happen to him. That's kind of how I viewed him as a person. So without taking him at face value, there isn't anyone really in this film that you'd be like, I want them to survive. Like, sure. I want them to do well.
I think the only person I felt like, I don't know, even remotely connected to was probably Dakota Johnson's character. Because I was just thinking, out of everyone that we've met so far, she's studying for something. She seems to have her head screwed on. She seemed, I don't know, like she was fairly well adjusted. I mean, obviously we're introduced to both Armie Hammer and Dakota Johnson's character when they're at the tail end of their kind of romance, or their relationship was clearly fizzled out or is dying. But I just kind of wanted her to. I was just like, I don't know. Okay, you can do better. What are you even doing with him? And the guy who played the boyfriend of Zazie Beetz, I thought, okay, he's because at the beginning of the film when we meet him, he's saying no to the drinks and he's like, I've got a deadline tomorrow. I don't want to drink it. And Armie Hammer's like, have a drink, drive home drunk or something, And it's just, I wasn't quite sure with Armie Hammer's journey. I think it was obviously at the beginning of the film, he's not a very likable character. And I thought maybe we'll have some sympathy for him throughout the movie. And then towards the end, you'll be rooting for him a little bit. Or sometimes, movie plots can be the other way around where you really like the character at the beginning. And then as the story progresses, they, you slowly disconnect from them or fall out of love with them. Or you realize that they're the bad guy or something. But Armie is like, he's a knob at the beginning and he's a knob at the end. I just didn't understand what was the movie asking from me. What was I supposed to do? What did it want me to do, Celia?
I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I feel like I don't think he's supposed to be likable, and I don't think we're supposed to connect with his character. And, overall, I think that for me personally, this film did scare me. And I was very surprised by that. Yeah. There were a few scenes where I was like, I am really creeped out.
Which scenes?
I mean, one of them was when he has that dream of that boy sitting at his table and he's faced away from him.
Yes. Yeah. That was a good scene. Yeah.
I was quite scared. I was like, what's going to happen? And I mean, and also I found the scene where he puts Dakota in the bath really creepy, because like she gets into the bath and then suddenly all this brown like liquid goes around her and she falls into the bath. And there's a few scenes in this film that I think are really unique. Yeah, like we haven't seen those kind of things before, and I really appreciate that. Like, I think for me, I quite enjoyed this because it felt different. It felt like a film that wasn't cut and dry. There weren't kind of spooks that I could say, okay, yeah, it was waiting around the corner. Oh, right. The music's building up and therefore there's going to be a jump scare. It was like a feeling of unease that I felt from quite early on. Like there was an ominous feeling for me from the initial bar scene where there's that fight that breaks out and you know that that's going to be significant, but you're not really sure why. And then he gets this phone and it's clear from the beginning that something is seriously weird with this. And I think it's like a slow burner with a lot of things happening.
Yeah.
Like we've seen a few horror films where it's a slow burner and then nothing happens. Whereas with this, it's like, it just feels like the pacing of it, for me, kind of hooked me. And I was like, I really want to know what's going to happen next, because everything's getting weirder and weirder and you're losing a sense of reality at quite a good rate.
Yeah. No, in that sense, I agree with you, where I was hooked throughout because I wanted to know what happened next, but because it does take you on loads of twists and turns and whatnot. But for me, at the end, there was no resolution or no.
Yeah.
I didn't know what this was. Was it like, I'll tell you what. So, at the end, when he goes to that big guy's house to check up on him to see if he's okay. I mean, when you see the flies and everything, I think it makes you think that the guy might be dead or something.
Yeah.
So, and then when he does go in the house, that guy is suddenly scared of Armie Hammer, saying like, "Oh, you shouldn't be here. Oh, they made me call you," or whatever. What I thought was going to happen was it was going to be revealed that Armie Hammer was the one who attacked him, and that's why he was scared of him. It was, I don't know, we were going to suddenly see scenes of the movie again, but it was Armie Hammer who was causing problems or something. But then, so like, I didn't understand that final scene, like where all the cockroaches come out, and I didn't get it. I feel really stupid. I feel like there's this thing in the movie that I just didn't get, or that I missed or something.
No, I totally agree. I think as much as I liked this film and I thought it was scary and I thought it was unique, it really ruined it with the ending for me, because, and I think I've said this before, but I really don't like it when a film builds up a really interesting plot and it's almost like the screenwriters don't actually know what the ending's going to be, so they just don't do it. They're just like, oh, we could sprinkle in things like, is Armie Hammer part of it? Like, who are these kids? Like, what was the ritual they were doing? Or any kind of resolution doesn't happen. And it's not like we want everything to be in little bows and be like, okay, we can answer everything, but it literally does not answer anything. It's on a full cliffhanger with no ending. And it just feels a little bit pointless to build up what I thought was a really interesting beginning half of a film, which was ominous and did make me scared.
Yeah.
To then not do anything with it. I mean, after the film, do you ever have this where you're like, is that it? When like the credits start and you're like, is that it?
Yeah,
I was like, I really didn't want to feel that way with this film because I liked how it started. But from thinking about it afterwards, I think what happened was there was like that really short scene where they kind of figured out that the demon only goes into souls that allow them in, and it comes through wounds that you have. So like you have to basically, kind of like Annabelle, like you have to do it on purpose, that you have to allow this thing in. And right in the end, did you notice that there was like that weird eyeball that came out of the side of his face, out of the side of the guy's like wound on his face when the cockroaches were coming on the screen?
Right.
And Armie Hammer's character like opened his mouth to allow the thing into his mouth. It was like the final scene before the last cockroach like went onto the screen. And I think that's supposed to show that he has lost everything and he's decided that he will be the vessel for this demon. And he has allowed that wound to be opened and therefore he has allowed the demon into his body. That's what I could think of. Did you see that like weird thing that came out of his mouth, out of his face?
I think I probably just have to see that last bit again, because I think that whole last scene was because it was just so what the hell I've just felt so deceived in that moment that I think I just need to watch that last bit again.
It's honestly, it's probably the last 2 frames of the scene. It's like, I imagine it is, barely anything, but you see him open his mouth and this weird like eyeball creature comes out of the wound in the guy's face and gets transferred to him. But the other question is, why did that guy have that thing in his face? Like, he wasn't part of the texts all the demon stuff before. He just got a bottle to the face at the beginning of the film and then stayed in his room the whole time. Like, we don't know what was happening with him.
I don't know if they were trying to draw some parallels, because at the beginning of at the end of the film when Armie Hammer's going nuts in the bar and then he bumps into that guy and throws him up against the pillar.
It's
right at the beginning of the film. Remember that guy does that to him. That guy does that. The big guy does that to the boyfriend character at the beginning of the film. Remember?
Oh my God! I think you actually might have just cracked something.
Yeah. I think, I don't know. I mean, I think they're trying to do some kind of mirroring, and the film kind of ends.
Yeah, because what if the big dude was having what Armie goes through afterwards? Like, before the film starts, he is possessed by this weird thing, and then he passes it on to Armie Hammer, and maybe, well, but I'm pretty sure that the phone was the kid's phone, like the teenager's phone in the bar, which started it all. So, like, how does that connect to the big guy?
I feel really bad saying this, but I've seen so many movies, high budget and low budget, where just random stuff is peppered in, and I just feel like maybe the writers or directors are trying to be pretentious by trying to be more smart than they really are, and maybe they think they're making a work of art, but really they've just made something that's a bit incoherent and not as clever as people think it is. And I just feel like that's what's happened here a little bit. And I don't like being spoon-fed movies.
Yeah.
Like, I do enjoy, I think we both do. We do enjoy kind of, having a think, breaking things down, letting things stew in your mind a little bit. But I just feel like this one was just a bit too vague, and I don't feel like the ideas were presented in a way where all the clues are there, and they're semi-obvious enough where, as an audience member, you can put the pieces together yourself.
Yeah.
But I just don't feel like it was. I don't feel like that was the case. I think it was just a bit of pretentiousness. And
yeah, I think that's fair enough. I mean, it feels like, for me, it was a great beginning half of a film. Like, the whole film was the beginning half of a film, and then you needed the second half of a film, which then kind of draws out a few of these themes and starts, like, for example, the tunnel that is shown on screen, and Dakota Johnson's character is like, she sits in a chair watching this video of a tunnel for so long that she wheezes herself and can't function until Armie Hammer's character pulls her away. That is never explained, like, what that tunnel is. It doesn't really have any bearing on what happens to Armie Hammer's character. It just happens to her, and then that's it. It's like, what's that got to do with the phone that he finds? What's that got to do with the kid's ritual? And then what's that got to do with the big dude at the end with the wound in his face? Like, none of those things work together. Like, there's no connection between the tunnel and everybody else, the kids and the big dude, or Dakota Johnson's character and anything else that's happening. But for some reason, they're all affected by this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first act of the movie, I mean, what I took away from this film at that point was like, okay, this is like a breakup movie. Like, this is about two characters who don't quite have that spark in their relationship anymore. But they kind of did at the beginning, like, very briefly. But so the girl clearly doesn't trust him because he's having secret conversations on a phone. Maybe he's cheating on her, or maybe she's always had suspicions. Maybe he's done it in the past. And I thought maybe with her looking at the laptop, maybe it was funny because in my head I'm thinking, oh, I'm pretty sure I've done that, where I've just spent an entire day on the computer without even realizing it, like a bloody zombie. Maybe, I don't know, is there some metaphor there, or
interesting.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's just little sparks of something where I was trying to join the dots, and but it just never. I feel like there was interesting ideas for a breakup movie in here, and they're just not seen through all the way. And
I mean, I will say that I thought that we've seen it loads of times in horror films where they do a descent into madness as they're not believed and stuff. I will give this film credit for Armie Hammer's descent, because there were some bits where I was getting quite stressed out for him. Like, I thought they did the flashes of images really well. When, like, something pops into your mind and you can't get rid of it. When he sees, like, the decapitated heads of the people he loves.
Those were quite good, those bits, yeah.
Like, I like those, and the fact that they flash out of nowhere.
They're quite jarring,
very jarring, and it does make you think, like, oh my god, this guy is, like, losing his sanity because he when he's driving in the car and then suddenly he's got, like, cockroaches all over him, and the way that the cockroaches kind of become a staple of his like loss of sanity, and they're just suddenly there, and he can see, they're just insidiously around all the time until the very end. I really like that. I like the build up of that. I also, one of the scenes that I thought was I got quite hooked in was when Armie Hammer's character's at the bar and he gets a text from Dakota Johnson's character, and he needs to run home, and because he gets text with a weird person like sitting on his bed, which he assumes is from this like demon through the phone. And like the camera is physically chasing him, and it's really wobbly. He's like running to the car, and then he runs out of the car, and it's quite frantic. And clearly the cameraman's like running after him because it's very like loosey goosey. And then he gets into the house and slams the door, and then suddenly the camera's back on its dolly, and it's very still, and he's very still. And just the transition of those two things of like panic, and then silence as he gets into the house. There's bits like that which I think made me enjoy watching this film up until the end, which is what really annoys me about the end, is that I was like, I actually think this could be a really good film, and I'm quite excited to see what happens. And that's why it's doubly annoying when it doesn't see it through to the end.
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree with you there, because at no point did I feel like, when is this going to end? I wanted to. I was interested all the way through, but I just felt like there wasn't a payoff. So like we'd invested 90 minutes of our time into this movie, only to have that squandered. Like there was no. I don't feel like I learned anything from it. All I learned is try not to be an empty, ambitionless, no goal person. He was literally just like going to work, coming home, going to work, coming home,
and
like, not
consistently drink driving, like blackout drunk driving. And I was like, do you ever? I sometimes see this in like American TV shows or movies where they just seem to just drive home after countless months drinking. Like, not sure we should be promoting that, but okay. But he does that a lot. And
no seatbelts either.
No seatbelts, and doesn't change his t-shirt for about 3 days in this film. And I literally wrote a note being like, he really needs to change out of the t-shirt before he goes into his bed. He doesn't. FYI. He's just a bit. But I think that is his character. We're not supposed to like him, and we're supposed to see him lose everything: his relationship, his friends, the person he loves, who is not his girlfriend. So that he does allow this thing to enter him. Whatever, that sounded weird, but that's the only thing I could think of with the ending. I mean, the other thing I will say about this film is it was quite gory and quite graphic.
Yeah.
Like when he finds the phone, he sees the photos on it, and he sees a video of like that skull, and then something pokes out of it, like a hand or something.
Like
I don't know what it, like a finger, which is obviously the demon getting out of that body. Like those were quite gory, and the cockroaches are really gross, and the guy with the slash on his face that gets worse and worse, like, ooh, it's really gross. The I have no problem with the visuals in this movie. It was like visually looked fine, and the special effects were good. It's just, but sometimes that's just not enough, is it? No, I know. It's got all of the traits of a really good film. It's got the foundations, but it hasn't built the actual house, which is the most important part.
And I just think, but outside of that, even right from the very beginning of the film, I just didn't think the dialogue was very good. There were some moments that were great, but throughout the film, I just couldn't help thinking, especially with Zazie, Dakota, and Armie, because they've been in big Hollywood films over the years. Like, I just wonder, like, they read this script and thought to themselves, I want to be a part of this project.
Yeah.
It was either that, or they were missold, or that contractually they had to make a movie for this company, or
they were paid a lot, and so they didn't care.
I don't think they were paid anything for this. But it's just that. Oh dear. I've read that the guy who directed it, his previous film, was very well received. So the only conclusion I could draw was they probably wanted to work with him, and maybe on this film the guy had a bit too much creative control.
And you can say that this film is very creative. It's very visually interesting. And you know what? I would not recommend this film to anybody after watching it. I mean, it doesn't take away from the fact that I enjoyed watching it and I was excited to see what would happen. But knowing how it ends makes me not want anybody else to watch it, because I'm like, well, you're going to have the same reaction of like, oh, this is really interesting. I'm quite scared. It's really gory. And then bam, nothing happens. So I'm kind of glad we watched it, because it was, like I said, a bit unique. And I don't know what it was. Maybe I was just really concentrating on this film, but like it did scare me. Like I'm going to admit this now, but there were a few scenes where I was looking through my hands, like at the screen.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know why.
That's saying quite a lot, actually, because that doesn't happen very often with us.
It doesn't happen very often. And but what I think that's a testament to the pacing of the film and the fact that it had a really good build-up atmosphere, regardless of like the dialogue or the acting or anything like that. I think the pacing of this film was really good, and that's why it was scary, but not worth going through that to then have essentially like a cliffhanger that we can't answer because there isn't enough in there. And maybe if we read the book, we would figure that out because they'd have more time to go through it and we'd see the nuances of it a little bit more. But as a 90-minute film, it might not have done it justice, and we might have missed the point. But yeah, it's a wound that we can't heal.